this. Okay, well, welcome to our third go-to meeting or go-to training of the month. So what I wanted to do tonight is kind of cover a few things for your project 3, your roto assignment, and give you guys a little extra. I'll show you guys how to create the actual lightsaber glow effect if you guys want to see how to do that. And we'll talk about the additional keyers that we use inside of Nuke, and just go over a few things for your project 4, your mat creation project. Just some maybe common issues I see students have with the project, some things you want to look out for, and things like that, okay? So that being said, have you guys had a chance to work on projects 3 or 4 yet? Remember, if you guys remember from our first go-to training, I said this week is usually our busiest week because we have these 2 projects that we're working on. All right, good. Okay. All right, well, let me just show you how I've gotten this broken down. Whenever you're doing your roto, again, you're going to want to make sure that you're staying organized with how you're doing your shapes. So you can see I've kind of got these broken down through the head, the robe, the hands, and the saber, and then the hoodie. Also, keep in mind with lifetime, you can see I've got a lot of shapes that turn on and off. So remember, you do have the ability to turn shapes on in the lifetime settings. So for example, this shape comes on frame 4, right? And it goes to about frame 8, right? And then when I don't need it anymore, I just turn it off. And then you can see it just sits there for the rest of the duration. Doesn't matter because it's turned off after frame 8. So don't forget to use your lifetime for your shapes. And again, create simple shapes, more simple shapes, right? You can see I've got quite a bit of shapes here to get all the detail that I need, okay? Make sure that you're getting all the detail for the hands and the saber. So you can see I've got shapes, getting all the individual fingers, and getting the edges of the saber where I need it, and so on. Okay. So it's nothing too complicated, but it does take some time. You can also see I've got additional shapes for his ear as it comes through here. Shapes, additional shapes for his cloak, and so on. All right. So what you're rendering out, obviously this is basically going to be your composite, which you can see I've just got it branched off here. Let's go ahead and close these properties, okay? So there's my composite over color bars, all right? And then I'm also using a shuffle node to shuffle out the matte channel. Now I'm doing this just one channel, so what I'm doing is I'm grabbing the red channel, or I'm grabbing the alpha channel and throwing it into the red channel, which is why it looks red here. And then on my right node, you can see I'm just rendering out the red channel, all right? And what this is doing is basically making a smaller file size for my movie, all right? Now you don't have to do it like this. You could just go ahead and grab every channel and throw it in the alpha like this, and then just render out a red channel, or you could do all 3 channels. You will have a larger file size for your movie file, and it's not really necessary. It's overkill. So you can turn off these 2 channels and just render the red channel. When you're doing your matte, that's fine. That'll work. All right, but just make sure that you get both these movies submitted. Also, make sure that your project is set to the correct resolution. So in your project settings, make sure that you set your project to 1920 by 1080. I see students that tend to leave this at the default, which the default is the 2K this, something like this. All right, so make sure that you are setting it to the proper resolution, which is the resolution of your read node. So just make it match the resolution of your read node, right? If you look at your read node, that's the resolution, 1920 by 1080. And just make sure that they're both at the right resolution and that your script is set up, okay? All right, so let me show you how to create the lightsaber glow effect if you guys want to do this. You can put this on your composite if you want, and this effect you can use for lightsabers, you can use it for laser blasts, and so on. This is basically how they were doing it on the prequels, which is a very simple technique of just doing different types of blurs and then merging those blurs together to create this glow effect. Okay. So if you have a separate shape that you've created for the saber, which you should, so let me find that shape. It should be in my group that is, okay, so here we go, lightsaber. You can just right click and copy this shape because we're going to use this shape in another roto node. So let's delete this. I'm going to create a new roto node by hitting O on the keyboard. I'm just going to go into my root directory here, right click and hit paste and paste that shape in. Alright, so sometimes it doesn't show up. If you close, reopen, there it is. Alright, so now you have that shape in that roto node. Now another thing you want to do is you want to make sure for this particular shape, for the lightsaber, that you are outputting into the color channels. So I'm going to output into RGBA. Alright, and then the way a basic lightsaber is broken up is into two main sections. You've got the core of the saber, and then you've got the overall glow of the saber. So you can see what I've done here. I just plugged the roto in, is I branched off two different streams, one going for the core, all right, and one going for the glow. So let's talk about the core first. So the core gets plugged into a grade node, and the core of a lightsaber always has a little bit of color to it. So I've added, you could see in the gain, a little bit of yellow to this, not a lot, just giving a little bit of color. And then I branched off two different blurs, and each one of these blurs are blurred at different amounts. So this blur 1, you can see I've only blurred it maybe a pixel and a half or 2 pixels. And then this blur has gotten blurred a little bit more, so 6 pixels, and then these just get merged together with a plus operation. So you get something like this, right? So you get a nice hot spot, and it's kind of got a bit of a fall off here from this blur. Now if you want more of a fall off, just go to your first blur and blur it out a little bit more, okay? All right. So that is our core, okay? And you can see then from that same shape, I've also branched off our glow. This is where we get the glow of our saber. Now lightsabers are always either chroma red if you're a Sith, chroma green, or chroma blue if you're a Jedi, right? So you can make this any color you want, right? Just go into your gain. I'm going to hold down Command to kind of branch this off. And you can select either chroma red, which is just removing the green and the blue, or if you want them to be a Jedi, just give them green or blue, right? So we'll do blue to start off with. And the same type of process with the core, right? So you just blur it twice. So for example, this one's getting blurred about 20 pixels. And these numbers are arbitrary or variable, okay, depending on, you know, just the look that you're going for. So I'm just plugging these blur numbers in here for now. And this is one that isn't blurred as much. Or actually, this should be blurred a little bit more. So we'll do this one at 20. I think I did it backwards, right? And this one at around 12. All right. And then they get added or plus together, right? So you get something that looks like this, right? And then once you've got that, you put your core over your glow, and there is your lightsaber. All right. And you could, if you want to, after you've combined these glows together, you could do another blur just to kind of globally blur it out if you want more of a fall off from the glow. Something like that, right? All right, and then once you just merge it over your comp, there is your lightsaber as he swings it around. All right, you can see it kind of gumming around, and of course, it's all going to be dependent on your shape. So if we go back to my shape here, and of course the blur of your core, so you can see there's the size of my shape. I'm going to turn motion blur off on the shape, and then I'll just probably just decrease these guys a little bit. Okay, but that's how you can create a lightsaber. And guys, if you want to do that, that's completely cool. You can put that on your comp. All right, we can increase this blur a little bit more. All right, again, like I said, it's just all dependent. These settings, these blur settings, it's just till you get a look that you're going for here. Just kind of set it however you want it. There you go, something like that. And then, of course, you want to change the color. we can do that after the fact. So we could either make them a Sith, a red one, or green, right? And of course, you know, you could do something like this, make a Mace Windu, right, with the magenta. Yeah, any color you want, right? Maybe yellow. Don't see too many yellow lightsabers, right? You do a cyan, right? Let's leave it blue for now. All right, so that's basically how they did it. Now they were doing a couple extra things with expressions, making the glow kind of pulsate and then the core kind of flicker. But that's the basic setup for how they did the glow. If I play, let's kind of play through it so you can kind of see it. All right. Okay, guys, so just keep in mind when you're doing your roto, you know, areas like this I could probably fix where I'm still seeing the background. These are areas where you'll kind of lose points on. So watch out for areas like this where you can still kind of see a little bit of the background. I would probably need to go into that shape and do some work, right, to kind of clean that up. Okay. And no jitters in your shapes. So make sure your roto looks nice and smooth as it plays through the animation. No shapes jittering or jumping around or anything like that. Okay. And just take your time when you're doing it. It's not, like I said, it's not very complicated, but it does take some time to get your work done. All right. So that's the roto. Does anyone have any questions about the roto assignment? No? How does it follow? How does what follow, Tony? The shapes you're setting keys on. So you'll go every few frames and set keys, keeping your shapes. All right. Yeah, well, I suggest, yeah, just kind of watch the podcast, watch through all the roto podcasts first, and then you can kind of follow along. All right. Whoops. Okay. So let's talk about our mat creation, or our procedural mat creation. This is project 4, where we're actually using a green screen or a blue screen, right, to do our keying. Okay, so what I'm going to do is kind of take you through the different keyers that we can use inside of Nuke. So I'm just going to create a new comp here. And I'm going to import the footage that you guys are using for your project. So, lectures. I'll do the actor plate. Now again, if you're seeing all the frames like this, just make sure that you have sequences checked on. And I'll go ahead and load in the background as well. Okay, so this is what you guys have. All right, and you guys can use any keyer that you want. We encourage you guys to use Primat, Keylight, or Ultimat. These are industry standard keyers that you tend to use a lot. They all work a little differently. But we also have these keyers here in Nuke that I'm just going to go over real quick and show you guys how they work. Okay, so we'll start with just the generic straight up keyer. Okay, now the keyer is basically based off these sliders, so you're dragging these A and B sliders around. You do also have a C and D slider, but these are more just for offsetting values, your black and white points. You won't need to use these as much. You'll primarily just use your A and B sliders. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and plug this into our comp here, right, and load it in the viewer. Okay, now by default, the operation for this keyer is set to a luminance key, meaning that it's going to try to pull a key based off the luminance information in the image, or the brightness of the pixels. So if you want to look at the luma, you just hit Y on your keyboard, and that is looking at just the luma. So it's just looking at the brightness of a pixel. It's not taking into account any color information. So I could start dragging these sliders around, trying to pull a key this way if I wanted to. So let's go to the alpha. There we go. Right. But this is not what we want for this particular shot, right? So I can set this to green screen since this is a green screen image, right? And now you can see it's starting to pull a matte based off the color information. So I can go ahead and start dragging this A slider, which is going to push values to black, starting with the darker values, right? So you can see as I keep dragging this, we're starting to push those values to black, right? We get something that looks like this, right? Of course, we've got all these areas that are in the center here, these holes in our matte, which is very bad, right? You can see them. And if I gamma down on my viewer, there's actually more. So if I keep going down, now we're exposing all the holes that are in our matte. So we have holes down here in his legs, and holes kind of here in the center, and holes around his hand, and so on, right? These are areas that you can lose points for, so be careful that you don't have any holes in your matte. All right. So again, you could get decent results with this, but you would need to do some additional work to kind of fill in those holes, right? Or if I kind of pushed it too far, right, you can kind of go back, kind of get something that kind of looks like this, and then I could try to grab that B slider and clip those holes out, right? But again, this is probably not the best keyer to use for this particular shot because of just the issues. It just doesn't give you as much control over the entire matte. All right. Now, we do have what's called a difference keyer. Now, what's cool about a difference keyer is the way a difference keyer works is it looks at two different inputs. All right, and it compares the difference between them, right, to kind of pull the matte. So if you think about it, you don't necessarily need to be on a green screen or a blue screen to do this. All you need is two images, right? And it'll look at the difference between those two images and try to pull the matte. So if you think about it, if you were shooting something on a stage, right? You could go ahead and shoot your performance of your actor. And then when you were done, just tell your actor to walk out of frame and just shoot a few seconds of the background without the actor in it, right? And get what we would call a clean plate. All right, once you would have those two images, what you would do is plug the one file with your actor in it into image A, and then the one file which is just the background into image B, and then the difference keyer would look at the two different images and compare the difference between it. That being said, the only thing difference between those two would be the actor, so it would try to pull the actor out based off those two images, okay? So what I'm going to do with this shot is I'm going to kind of fake creating a clean plate or a green screen. I'm just going to use a roto node here real quick. And I'll do something like this. And I'm just going to draw a quick shape around our actor here. And I'm just going to color this shape green, right? So we're going to kind of fake a clean plate here. All right. So also want to make sure I output this in the RGBA. Okay. So what I'm going to do is sample this green. I'm holding down Shift Command to create a sample region, and there's that value that I've sampled. I'm going to go into the color of this Bezier, right? I'm just going to drag that little swatch from my viewer and drop it into the color of the Bezier shape, right? Make it green like that. So not perfect. I'm going to go ahead and feather this out a little bit, this shape. But for this demo purpose, this will work, all right? Something like this. So then I'm going to plug this into the A input and then plug my original plate into the B input and load this in the viewer. Now, if I hit A on the keyboard, that is the difference that it's giving me. So it's looking at these two. I'll hit Option P on this so you can see it. All right, so it looks like we got two different images here. Okay, something like this. Gonna pull this up and we'll do something. There we go. All right. So you can see what it's doing. It's looking at this guy and it's looking at this guy. And the difference between them is this, all right? Now, if we're thinking in terms of an alpha channel, this is still very far from being complete, right? Alpha is white, 1 represents completely being opaque, and black is completely transparent. So this, all these semi-transparent pixels that are mostly transparent, right? If I were to pre-molt this and put it over our background, he's going to look like a ghost, right? So if I shift hit A. Right, whoops, let's go ahead and make sure I'm setting my project. I'll make sure you're setting this up. There we go. Okay, so you can see he looks kind of like a ghost, which is a cool effect, but not necessarily the effect we are going for, right? Okay, so what you could do is after the difference keyer, you could create a grade node, right? And just call it color correct your alpha. So I'm going to work in the alpha, right? So I'm going to set my channels to alpha for the grade node. Yeah, it looks like okay. Yeah, it kind of looks like kind of ghoulish, right? And let's clip these whites, right? Let's get this to be a little bit more opaque. Let's see what we can do with this. I'm just going to push this up. See how far I can go with it? You can see I'm starting to get a lot of noise because of that shape I created, right? That's the difference, right? Let's keep going with this. All right. And let's mess with the gamma. Let's see if we can get rid of a lot of that noise. All right. And now we're getting something that looks more like a usable matte. Yeah, we still have these issues here. I could clip my blacks to kind of get rid of that. So I'll go into my black point here. And whoops, and just kind of push this down. Clip those out, maybe. Now we're getting all this noise again in the holes in our matte. So I would probably want to create another roto that's just in the alpha. So output it in the alpha and just create a shape that just kind of covers or fills in those holes here. Something like that, right? Fills that up. Again, we've got issues with this hand here and so on. But once this is pre-multed and we look at it over our background, now we're getting a much better result from our difference key. All right. So that's one way you could do it, okay? Now we have a better difference keyer, actually in Nuke, that we can use other than just the straight up difference. The IBK gizmo and color nodes, right? This is another type of difference keyer. IBK stands for image-based keyer, all right? So let's just kind of redo all this. We're just going to kind of delete these guys here and this guy here. Okay, so you'll notice the IBK gizmo has got a few inputs here. We've got a C input, a foreground input, and then a background input. Now the background input is not for actually doing the composite. This has to do with spill correction. So what it's going to do is it's going to try to correct for spill using values from the background that we see here. All right, so pretty nifty what we can do. All right. Okay, so the C input, this is where you would plug in your clean plate. If you had that clean plate on set where you had the actor kind of walk away and you just shot the green screen, that's where you would plug this in. All right, if you don't have a clean plate, this is where this color node comes in handy. This color, IBK color node, will create a clean plate for you. Very similar to what I did with the Roto paint node earlier, but this actually works a little bit better. So if I plug this into my color, go ahead and load this in the viewer. First thing I need to do with this color node is tell it that the screen type that we're using is green, right? And you'll notice what it's doing is anything that's not green in the image, it's kind of blacking out and it's just leaving the green screen, okay? So if I'm still getting some little edge detail, which you can kind of see I'm getting this kind of yellowish hue still kind of popping out around the edges, that's going to probably be in my red channel here. So I'm just going to go into my red channel and start trying to dial that out. I'm just going to go into the darks here and see what I can do. All right, so you can see I'm just kind of trying to remove that. You want to be careful. If you start getting holes in the side, that means you've kind of pushed it too far. So you just want to go back and kind of remove that. All right, but that looks pretty good. So we've kind of blacked out everything in our image that isn't green, right? And then once you have got that, you go into this patch black slider here, and what it's going to do is fill in this hole that's black with all these, an average of all these surrounding pixels, which is green. So as I do this, it kind of creates our clean plate for us, right? So now that we have that, what we can do is plug this into the C input of our gizmo. So if you watch, what's great about this gizmo, I set the screen type to green and just kind of load it in, and you can see there is our matte that it's giving us. And it's still retaining a lot of the noise and grain, which is actually a good thing if we're going to composite it over our background, which doesn't have noise, right? So again, like I said, it's not doing the comp for us. We would have to merge it. Right? And there is our composite that it's giving us, with the grain still intact, right? You can see we're still getting some edge issues. That's from that shade that we're getting. That's on the original, this guy. Okay, so what we could do is you would probably want to adjust this alpha channel a bit. Yeah, and you can see we're getting some holes too. So I would go in and probably, let's see here. Let's create a grade. And I probably want to go into the alpha. Let's adjust our gamma. Let's get rid of all that. All right, maybe clip our whites. All right. And then maybe work on getting rid of these. We could do this with a roto. All right, so I would draw a shape, a garbage, right, around my actor here. And invert the shape. And then just set the blending mode to minus here to get rid of that. And you can see we still got all these holes that we would have to deal with, which we could either do with roto or paint work. So I could create Beziers here to kind of fill in these holes. And of course, as he would move, especially around the shoulder, you would need to animate these to kind of hold these in. But this is how you could try to pull keys using difference keys. And again, depending on your clean plate, which is, it's always preferable to get a good clean plate on set, right, as opposed to trying to generate one. You get better results. But you could get some decent looking keys. We can go and clean this up just with clipping our blacks here. Let's see if we can just get rid of that. There we go. And finally, what I'm going to do, I'm going to set this up just a little bit different here. Move this over. I'm actually going to copy this in to the original plate's alpha and then pre-molt this. This will need to be pre-molted. You get something that looks a little better there. Now again, we're losing the grain, but we could add that in synthetically in the background with a grain node, right? Sure that is off. So now we're getting grain back into our background. All right, still getting some kind of really sharp edges, which is not something that you want ideally. We could blur this out. Create a blur. And let's see if we can kind of soften this edge a little bit. And of course, we got to remove our spill here. Since we've got it set up this way where I'm copying it into the original plate, we need to create our hue correct so we can get rid of that spill. So whenever you're doing hue correct, you basically want to get this green to be a neutral gray. So you can sample this green here, and you can see it's giving me, there's that hue of that green. So I'm going to go into the green suppression here, kind of grab one of these points and line it up with that line, and just kind of yank it down. And you can see we're getting a lot of red. You still see a lot of red here, so just go to your red suppression, grab that green, and just kind of drag it out. So you start getting something that looks a little gray, right? It just looks gray. So we're just kind of removing all that green. All right. Again, this is a different chain with all the alpha, right? We go here. Now it's pre-molted, and we've removed that spill. There we go. I think it's looking a little bit better there. Again, the hair would need some work, but this is how you can pull a key using the IBK gizmo, all right? So those are just some additional types of keyers you can use other than Primat, Keylight, and Ultimat for getting your key. Now, again, you're going to be graded on how well your edge looks and if there's any holes in your mat, right? So like I said earlier, make sure that you don't have any holes in your mat. If you need to fill those in with shapes or do additional keys and add them on top. And again, make sure you have a decent looking edge as well. The error was on the grain node. It wants to default to only put the grain through the alpha channel, but because I didn't have an alpha channel for this guy, see it's empty, the alpha is empty, it gave me an error because it says apply only through alpha. This is checked on by default. So if you check this on, you see you get this error. Now if I had an alpha channel, it wouldn't do that. So if I create, let's say, a roto node, and I just create an alpha channel, so now this has an alpha, right? It shouldn't do that, see? No error. And you'll notice that the grain is only in this area where there's an alpha channel. No grain, and then grain, no grain, then grain. All right, that's all that was. By default, it's on, so if you use your grain, just uncheck it, turn it off, right? Okay, any questions on anything I've shown you guys? That reminds me about one more thing. No? Are you sending this exact video? Nope. What do you mean, Tony? Am I sending this exact video? Oh, yes, I can. I will. The one last week was, yeah, it was an archived one, but yeah, I can send this one. I'll put it up on YouTube. All right, so the last thing I want to show you guys is how you match grain. Something I kind of skipped and I haven't done yet. So you'll notice that your foreground has grain. This is actually from film, and this is the film stock grain. You can see all this noise, right? As I play through. Hopefully you can see this through the go-to training, all right? Now we need to match that to our background, because if we look at our background is just, an image that was painted in Photoshop. There's no grain. It's very clean, okay? By tomorrow. It'll be up by tomorrow, Tabitha. All right. Yeah, Sierra, what was your question? I'm sorry, I missed it. You said you had a question about something that happens with your alpha? Right, that's right. You did that right. Creates a gray part in the alpha. Is that in you said in the alpha, or is that in the color, the RGB, that you get the halo? Uh, hmm. I have to look at it. Is there any way you can post that real quick to Concept Share? I can take a look at it. Just do it. You can either do it just a screen grab, just show me what you're talking about, so I can kind of see it. If I can see it, maybe I can see what you mean. Sure, no problem. All right. So yeah, while you're doing that, let me show you guys how you can match grain here. Okay. Um, okay. So how I like to do it for this particular shot is first I create a constant that's this green color. So what I'm going to do is do Command Shift and select a range of this green. I'm going to grab a pretty big region here, so it gives me a really good average of what this green color is. And then I'm going to create a constant here. And for the color of the constant, right, I'm going to hold down Command and branch that off. I'm going to drag this color, and okay, let me do it that way. So let's do it this way, right? And create that green constant color, okay? So then I'm going to create my grain and plug it underneath the constant here. So now this constant has got grain applied to it. And then what I do here is I use my wipe on my viewer. So I put my original plate on viewer input 1, and then my grain I put on the second input of the viewer, okay? Just like this. And then I use the wipe command up here in the top of our viewer. So if I wipe between these two inputs, you can see on the left, I've got my grain. On the right, I've got the original plate. So now it'll be much easier trying to match my grain once I go into the settings. So I go into the grain node. Okay, I'll take a look in just a second. So now you want to adjust your grain based off the color, the channel information, or the different channels. So I'm going to look at the red channel first by hitting R on the keyboard. I just want to match the grain between these two channels. So you'll notice on the left, or on the right, I'm sorry, is the original footage. This is what I'm trying to match. And on the left is my synthetic grain. So you can see that it looks to be a little bit bigger on the right. So I'm just going to increase the size. And this is an approximation. So you're just trying to get an approximate. It's not going to be exact. You can also notice that it's not quite as dark, right, as it is on the left as opposed to the right. So that means the intensity, I'm just going to lighten up just a little bit. Something like that. Actually, I think I went a little too big on the side, so I'm going to bring that back down. All right. And what you're trying to do is just make that wipe line kind of disappear. Once you've got it disappeared, you know that you're pretty close to what your grain should look like, right? So that's my red channel. Then I'm going to go to the green channel and do the same thing. So you'll notice the green, a lot different here, right? The size, maybe I could increase the size just a little bit, but I definitely need to bring the intensity way down. Almost something like that, right? Again, it's an approximation, so you're not going to get it exactly like it is, but you're just trying to get it close, okay? That looks good. And then I can go to my blue channel, which again, whoa, look at the blue. Look how different the blue is, right? So that size needs to come way up, right? And then the intensity, I'll bring that down. Let's see, let's kind of bring it more like this here. And you could adjust the irregularity to maybe get something that looks a little bit better. something. Blue is always going to be the channel that has the most amount of noise in it. Okay, maybe something like that. That should work. Okay, so once you've got that, now you've got a grain pattern that matches much more with the reference. So you can go ahead and disconnect this and plug this into your background here. Get rid of this alpha. So now we've got our grain on the background here. So there's our grain. So before, no grain, and then added the grain in, right? Which will match your foreground plate, right? The grain that you see in the sky. All right. Okay, let me take a look at your post here real quick. That makes sense with the grain. Make sure you don't forget about your grain. I think it's something I don't know if I don't think I show it in the podcast, but again, it's part of the composite and integration. Mm-hmm. That's all right. Okay, one thing you could do, a simple solution would just be a gamma adjustment on your roto would get rid of that. You just want to be careful about your edge detail when you do that. Specifically, because this value, you could, essentially just gamma it out, but you want to be careful about this area here between his arm. This tends to be a problem area. This little hole here between his arm and the side of his side. So watch out for that area if you do a gamma adjustment on it. I'm not quite sure why it's doing that. I would have to see how you have your node set up. But what you could do, Sierra, is just put, like I said, a grade node on the alpha and do a gamma correction on that area, and that would fix that. So isolate that area. So I'm gonna pretend this is your script here, right? So you're working in your alpha, and you want to do an adjustment, but you just want it to affect this area. Similarly to how you did the blur, do a roto node that isolates just that area, create a grade node, and plug the mask input of the grade node into that roto. So when you do your gamma adjustment to get rid of that gray, it only affects that area. Notice how you can see only that area is getting affected. That should fix that. Yeah, no problem. All right, well, that's pretty much what I wanted to show you guys. You guys have any questions for the last few minutes of the go-to training? Yeah, what's up with the car, Tony? Oh, the grilled channel? Sure. You use whatever you want to get what you're going to be graded on is how closely you match the reference. So you can use any one of those channel sets to do it. Yeah, and I'll try to have those grades done by Monday, guys. I haven't had time to get to them this week. Um, but yeah, your grades should be posted Monday. Tomorrow I got meetings in the morning and then I have lecture in the afternoon, but I'll get them done by Monday. All right, guys. Well, thanks for showing up. If you guys have any questions, feel free to find me on iChat or shoot me a message. If not, I'll try to get everything the recording converted and up and posted and up by tomorrow. Okay. All right. Well, thanks, guys. I'll go ahead and end the meeting. Everyone have a good night. I'll talk to you guys next week.